Hey everyone, we're diving into AI ethics today.
Oh, yeah, some really fascinating stuff.
I mean, it's clear that, everyone's thinking about this
Absolutely.
all the time, like every day.
Yeah, front page news.
Exactly. And we're using this YouTube podcast discussion with AI experts that, one of our listeners sent in as a jumping off point.
I think it's a great place to start because, these aren't just hypotheticals we're talking about.
Right.
These ethical challenges are happening right now.
Yeah, they're like real world right in our faces.
Exactly.
Like this whole thing with Amazon
Oh.
and their AI hiring tool.
How could that happen?
I know, we'll get into that. Like, how is it even possible that an AI could discriminate against women?
Yeah.
But, and then we have facial recognition.
Oh, yeah, huge debate there.
I know. Big one, San Francisco banned it.
Rightly so. Or was it a mistake?
I don't know. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, isn't it? Between progress and, making sure we don't accidentally create some dystopian future.
Right. Like, we don't want to go all Black Mirror on this.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's start with this bias problem.
Okay.
So the YouTube podcast had this example
Okay.
about Amazon's AI recruiting tool that it actually penalized resumes.
What?
Yeah, that used the word women's.
Oh, wow.
It's like women's chess club or, whatever.
Yeah.
So how could that happen? I mean, how does an AI even develop that kind of bias?
Well, it really comes down to the data.
Okay.
AI learns from the data it's given, right? So if the data is full of existing biases,
Yeah.
we know, sadly, gender discrimination is a thing,
Of course.
then the AI is just going to learn those patterns
Right.
and then spit them right back out.
So it's like garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, but then how do you fix it? Like once you have a biased AI,
Right.
you just
Right.
bias an algorithm.
You can, but it's not like you just flip a switch.
Right.
It's a process.
Okay.
One thing you can do is audit the data very carefully, looking for these hidden proxies.
Proxies.
Yeah, things that could be stand-ins for race or gender, things you wouldn't even think of, like Veep codes,
Oh,
where it can actually reveal a lot about someone's background.
Okay.
So you got to remove those, and then you test it and test it and test it
Okay.
across different groups to make sure it's being fair.
Gotcha. So it's like giving the AI a test.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So it's learned its lesson.
Hopefully.
This brings up a big question, though.
Okay.
Can AI ever be truly neutral? I mean, if it's created by humans and we all have our own biases.
You're hitting on a really deep question there, and it's one that researchers are struggling with all the time.
Right.
Can we create something that's more objective than we are? I mean, that has huge implications, right? For so many things.
From hiring to criminal justice?
Yeah.
I mean, this is big stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Let's move on to facial recognition.
Okay.
You mentioned real-world examples.
Yeah.
This is one.
And this is a big one.
Yeah, so the podcast talked about San Francisco's ban on facial recognition.
Yeah.
But then others say it's crucial for safety,
Right.
like for security reasons.
Right. So is it essential, or is it like a slippery slope to a surveillance state?
Right. I mean, where do you stand on that?
It's tough. There are legitimate concerns about privacy.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a world where your every move is being tracked, analyzed.
That's a little creepy.
Yeah, it's a bit Orwellian, isn't it?
Yeah. And the experts on the podcast also talked about how facial recognition can be used unfairly
Oh, yeah.
against people based on their race.
Absolutely a huge concern.
Yeah. That's scary stuff.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people say regulation is key, not to stifle innovation, but to set boundaries to make sure AI is used responsibly.
So we protect people's rights.
Yeah.
Okay. But the podcast also brought up the potential benefits.
Right.
Like finding missing kids.
Absolutely.
Catching criminals.
Of course.
I mean, that's got to count for something, right?
Well, yeah, and the AI startup founder in the podcast argued that too much regulation could backfire.
Okay.
Make it harder for smaller companies.
Right.
Could even drive development underground where it's harder to control.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and this connects back to the EU's AI Act.
Oh, yeah?
Which has pretty strict regulations.
Right.
So it seems like no matter what, there are trade-offs.
Yeah, what do you think about this, listener? Where do we draw the line?
I don't know. It's a question we all have to grapple with.
Safety versus privacy.
Yeah, what kind of future do we want?
Okay, let's shift gears for a sec.
Okay.
I want to talk about some audience questions from the podcast.
Oh, yeah, those were really interesting.
Yeah, they really were. So someone asked,
Okay.
if AI can be so biased, shouldn't we just stick to humans making decisions?
Well, it's a good question, but remember, humans are biased too.
Oh, that's true.
Right. We all have our blind spots.
Yeah.
But the thing about AI is that it's scalable.
Okay.
So if we can fix the bias in the code,
Yeah.
that fix can be applied everywhere.
Oh, so it's like a more universal solution.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, here's another one.
Okay.
This one really got me thinking.
Okay.
Should AI developers have to take some kind of Hippocratic Oath
Oh, wow.
like doctors do?
Do no harm.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that?
I think it's a powerful idea.
Okay.
I mean, doctors pledge to use their knowledge to help people.
Right.
Why not AI developers to
Right.
make sure AI is used ethically,
Yeah.
maybe even have consequences like losing your license?
Wow, okay.
Something unethical.
An AI developer's oath.
Yeah,
Something to think about, isn't it?
definitely.
What do you think, listener? What kind of ethical framework do we need?
Yeah, we need to decide what values we want to embed in these systems.
Right.
And how to hold people accountable.
This has been a great discussion so far.
It really has.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
So when we come back in part 2, we'll dive even deeper into some potential solutions for building more ethical AI.
Yeah.
And we'll explore that tricky challenge of regulating a technology that's constantly evolving.
Okay, I'm ready.
Don't go anywhere. Wow, it's amazing to see how much people care about this stuff.
I know, right?
Like the comment section on that YouTube podcast was on fire.
Yeah, people are really engaged.
It's clearly something everyone's thinking about.
It shows that AI isn't just some abstract concept anymore.
Right.
It's impacting our lives in real ways.
So, okay, we've talked about some of the problems of like bias in AI.
Right.
But where do we go from here? The podcast mentioned some potential solutions, but I felt like it was kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
So what do you think is like the most important thing when it comes to building more ethical AI?
Well, I'd say transparency is key.
Okay.
The more we understand how these AI systems work,
Yeah.
the better we can identify and fix problems.
Like bias.
Exactly. It's like shining a light into that black box.
Because if we don't know how the AI is making decisions, how
Right.
can we hold it accountable?
Exactly.
The podcast kept talking about explainable AI.
Oh, yeah, XAI?
Yeah, XAI. What is that?
So basically, it's about making AI's decision-making process more transparent,
Okay.
so we humans can understand it.
So it's like giving the AI a voice so it can tell us why it did what it did.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
I feel like that would go a long way toward building trust.
Absolutely. If we can understand the logic behind a decision,
Yeah.
then we can decide if it's fair,
Right.
unbiased,
Okay, that makes sense.
aligned with our values.
It also seems like having diverse teams develop AI would be important.
Oh, absolutely. Diversity is crucial. If you have a team that's all the same,
Yeah.
they're more likely to have blind spots.
And build their own biases into the system.
Exactly. It's like you don't know what you don't know. You need people with different
To
perspectives.
challenge assumptions.
Yeah.
Point out problems.
And not just demographic diversity.
Okay.
We need diversity of disciplines, too.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Like ethicists,
That's
social scientists, philosophers working alongside the computer scientists.
So building ethical AI, it's not just a technical problem.
Right. It's a human problem.
It's a people problem.
It needs a human solution.
Okay, the podcast also talked about the challenges of regulating AI.
Oh, yeah.
It seems so difficult.
It really is.
Like, how do you regulate something that's constantly changing?
It's one of the biggest challenges we face.
Right, because traditional regulations,
Yeah.
they just can't keep up.
But we can't just give up.
Right, the stakes are too high.
Exactly.
So how do we approach this? Like, how do we regulate effectively without stifling innovation?
Well, one idea is to focus on principles
Yeah.
rather than specific rules.
Oh, okay, I like that.
So instead of trying to control every little detail,
Yeah,
we set broad guidelines
like what?
like fairness, transparency.
Mm-hmm. Accountability.
So it's like setting up guardrails but allowing for flexibility.
Exactly. Okay, that seems smart.
Another idea is to use a risk-based approach.
A risk-based approach.
Yeah, so we regulate AI systems based on how much potential harm they could cause.
So like an AI that diagnoses medical conditions
Exactly.
would need more oversight than like an AI that recommends movies.
Right, because a bad movie recommendation is annoying.
Yeah,
But a misdiagnosis could be life or death.
that makes sense.
The challenge is figuring out how to define harm
Oh yeah?
and who gets to decide that.
That's a tough one.
It really is. It highlights the need for broader conversations about AI ethics.
Not just with the experts.
Right, this concerns everyone.
You mentioned the EU's AI Act earlier.
Yeah.
It seems like they're taking this seriously.
The AI Act is one of the most comprehensive attempts to regulate AI.
Really?
It classifies AI systems based on their risk level.
Oh, okay, so like different categories?
Yeah, and higher risk systems,
Mm.
like those used in healthcare or law enforcement, face stricter rules.
So it's like a tiered system.
Exactly. More oversight for the systems that could have the biggest impact.
Makes sense. And the AI Act also emphasizes human oversight.
Yes, very important.
So humans are still in control.
Right, we need to make sure AI is a tool,
Yeah.
not a replacement for human judgment.
It should empower us,
Exactly.
not the other way around.
Right.
So we've got transparency, diversity regulation.
Important stuff.
Anything else? Like, are we missing any pieces of the puzzle?
Well, one really important thing is to make sure the people who are most likely to be impacted by AI
Yeah.
have a say in how it's developed.
Oh, okay.
We need to involve communities that have historically been marginalized
Right.
and often disproportionately affected by algorithmic bias.
So it's not just about building ethical AI.
Right.
It's about building equitable AI.
Exactly. AI that benefits everyone.
Not just a select few.
It's a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
From a purely technical view to a more human-centered approach.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It really has.
I mean, if we want AI to be a force for good,
Yeah.
we need to be having these tough conversations now.
Absolutely. The choices we make about AI today will have consequences for years to come.
Before we go to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to hear from you, listener.
Yes.
What's resonating with you?
What are your thoughts on these complex ethical dilemmas?
Take a moment to reflect.
Yeah.
And we'll continue the conversation in part 3. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. So we've talked about bias, we've talked about regulation, but now I want to get philosophical.
Yeah, let's do it.
At the end of the YouTube podcast, there was this question that really stuck with me.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, could AI actually develop its own sense of ethics?
Whoa.
It's a big one, right?
Yeah, that's deep.
It makes you think about what even is consciousness?
Right, we assume ethics is a human thing.
Yeah.
But what if AI could learn morality?
Okay, hold on. That's kind of freaking me out.
I know, it's a lot.
Are we talking about AI judging us?
Not necessarily judging, but...
It sounds like a sci-fi movie where the robots take over.
Okay, let's not go there.
Okay.
But it is a really interesting thought experiment.
Yeah.
What would it even mean for AI to have its own ethics?
Right, how would that even work?
We're so used to thinking of ethics as something that's programmed.
Yeah, we give AI the rules.
But what if it could learn ethics through experience?
Okay, so instead of us telling it what's right and wrong,
yeah,
it figures it out on its own.
Exactly. Think about it. We already have AI that learns from its mistakes.
Right, adjusts its behavior.
So what if through that process,
Yeah.
it starts to develop its own understanding of right and wrong?
Can you give me a concrete example?
Sure. Imagine an AI that's managing traffic flow in a city.
Okay, yep.
And it learns that prioritizing emergency vehicles leads to better outcomes for everyone.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That's a form of ethical decision-making.
Right, it's making a choice.
Even though it wasn't specifically programmed that way.
Okay, but what if it learns the wrong ethics?
That's the big question.
Right, what if it decides that the best way to manage traffic is to ignore pedestrians?
Well, that's why human oversight is so important.
Okay.
You can't just let AI run wild.
Yeah, we have to be involved.
We need to guide its development.
So it's like raising a kid.
Exactly. You teach them right from wrong.
And hope they make good choices.
Right, even when you're not looking.
But whose values are we talking about?
That's a good point.
People disagree on ethics all the time.
They do.
So how do we choose what to teach AI?
It's a huge challenge. It requires a global conversation.
Yeah.
We need to figure out what kind of future we want to build.
Together?
Yeah.
Well, listener, we've come to the end of our deep dive.
It's been quite a journey.
We've explored some heavy stuff.
We have from bias to the possibility of AI developing its own ethics.
And we've just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to learn and discuss.
But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this,
What's that?
it's that building ethical AI is a process.
It's ongoing.
It requires constant attention and critical thinking.
And a willingness to have these tough conversations.
Because ultimately, AI is a reflection of us.
It is.
The values we embed in it will shape the world we live in.
So we need to be careful.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
If AI can potentially develop its own sense of ethics, what does that say about consciousness itself?
Oh, wow.
Is it really just a human thing?
Big questions.
Or could it exist in other forms?
Yeah, food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AI ethics.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.
Because the future of AI depends on it.